We're starting on Daf Ches Samad Beis, where it says Amar Rav Chanan, 4 lines from the bottom. The Gemara here was discussing different halachas in connection to the Dalat Kaisis. And one of the things it discussed is when you get to the shear of a revius. So here the Gemara is going to bring a few different ways how to measure what a revius is. Amar Rav Chanan said, Luga da iraisa, a lug minatayra. How do you measure what that is? A revius is essentially a quarter of a lug. Right, so if we know what a lug is, we know what a revius is. So lug minatayra tumunte atike de muryaise de tzipayri. It's this old vessel that's called a tumunte that was a measuring keli, and they used it for muryaise de tzipayri, for the fish sauce in the city of Tzipayri. Rav Yaina said, "V'chachamnala, I recognize this keli, the base Rav Yanai, being used in the house of Rav Yanai Have was there. Mechilim badvash, they would measure in it, or they would keep in it honey. Tani, in another brayse, we learned about the measurement of a log. Chatzi shminis tavaryonis, half of this measuring keli that's called a shminis in Tveria hayeshana, and the old ones that they used to use then, that was a log." Rav Yechanan said about this, Hadein Didan, the measuring at Shminis that we have now as well, it's also the same shear like it was then. So the Gemara asks, if it's the same shear now like it was then, V'lama Karila Atika, so why did he refer to it as the old one, the one that they used then? Min begin the have b'yayme, if it's the same in his days as well now, so why are we calling it the old one? So the Gemara gives two answers. Is the Amri, there are those that said the have ze'ira, this measuring keli that's called Shminis in Tveria, it was smaller, v'rapsa, and then it became bigger. In other words, it changed in size. In the beginning it was revius, then it got smaller, and then it became back bigger. So he's telling you that it's the way it was then, to know that it was the way it was originally in the big size. There is the Amri, others say it dropped differently. The Azira, it was Lachatchila Revius, then it became smaller, and V'loy Azira Kamay Dahavis. And it became bigger, then it became smaller again. When it became smaller again, it didn't go back to be exactly like it was in the beginning, which is a Revius, and therefore we're saying that it's Hayushana. The way it was then it was a Revius. So those are different options of what you can use, the Tumunsa, Shminis, to see, to measure what a log is. Now the Gemara tells us what is the size of a log in the space. Kamahu shir shel kais, how large does a kais have to be for a revius? Rav Yaisi b'shem Rav Yaisi ben Pazi v'Rav Yaisi ben Bivi bar Bivi b'shem Rav Shmuel said it's etzba'ayim al etzba'ayim, 2 finger breadths by 2 fingers, al roim etzba umechza a shlish etzba, and the height of it is 1 etzba and a half etzba and another third of an etzba. This same question was asked in the Gemara in Psachim, if you remember, in Arvei Psachim, and there the Gemara gave a little bit of a different answer. There it said it's a etzba'ayim, by an etzba'ayim, by the height of etzba'ayim. If I remember, I think it was etzba'ayim and a half a etzba and a fifth of an etzba. And the Gemara there brought a whole cheshbon, learned it out from a mikveh. Taisus there brings our Gemara here in Shkalim and says that it's a stira, it's not the same answer, and Taisus tries to give an answer to explain how the Gemara gives a few different shiurim for a revius. Like upon him, you see already in this Mana Gemara, it was struggling with understanding what exactly a revius is, and Bismana as well, you have all kinds of different shiurim from revius, going all the way from 2.9 to what? The 2.9 ounces to 5 point something, so there's many different shiurim for what a revius is. So Akta Gemara, Tani was learned in a brayse, Yavish, if the liquid becomes congealed, so then kezayis, the shear of it will be a kezayis. Okay, this is b'negea to, we're talking before in the Gemara about carrying out on Shabbos, that the shear to carry out wine or water on Shabbos, what's the shear? A revius. So when it becomes congealed, wine becomes congealed, what will be the shear? A kezayis. Divrei Rab Nosson. That's the opinion of Rab Nosson. So the Gemara now explains why is this a shear for when it becomes congealed. So Rabbanan the Kaisri, the Rabbanan of the city Kaisri, Rav Yaisi Babivi B'Shem Shmuel, they said Asya de Rab Nosson ke Rab Shimon. What Rab Nosson is saying, that when it's congealed, that the shear is a kezayis, that's based on what Rab Nosson said. Kamo de Rab Shimon Omar b'Revius, just like Rab Shimon said, if you carry out on Shabbos, what's the shear or Revius? Kain Omer Rav Nosson, so too Rav Nosson is saying, B'Revius, l'kesheyikrash v'yehei by kezayis. The nature of the wine is that if it's a shear of a revius, when it congeals, so it becomes a little bit less of what it was when it was liquid, and what you'll have from a revius of wine when it congeals, it'll be a kazayas. So the kazayas is the same as a revius when it's liquid. Rab Shimon b'Shem Rab Yeshua ben Levi Maisa, he said the following story. He repeated over the following story in connection to what we're speaking about, a revius of wine. So here it's going to talk about a revius of blood regarding the tumah of an avela. If you have a revius of blood from an avela, will it become tameh? What's the amount of it to be tameh? So the Gemara brings a story about this. So there was a story b'Preidas Rebbe, with a mule in the house of Rebbe, Shemesa, that died, v'tiru es dama mishum nevela. And they said that the blood of this animal is tied. It doesn't have the tum of an avela. Shal Rabbi Eliezer, Rab Simon, so Rabbi Eliezer that heard this story being said. From Rab Simon. So he asked Rab Simon, at kama, what was the amount of blood that they said that it's tied? It does not have the tum of the nevela. He didn't answer him the question. So Vishal Rabbi Shua ben Levi. So Rab Simon didn't want to answer him. So he went to the source. Rabbi Shua ben Levi was the one that told Rab Simon about this. So he went to Rabbi Shua ben Levi. And he asked him, the revius toir. Was it said that if it was up to the amount of revius, then it would be toir? But yoiser revius tame. But if it would be more than the revius, then it would be tame. And the reason why there would be a difference is because the halacha by an avela is a kezayis of an avela is metame. And we just explained before that a revius of liquid, when it congeals, it becomes a kezayis. So therefore he was saying, do we say that if it's a revius of liquid, of the blood, so then it becomes tame because that would be the amount of a kezayis. So maybe they weren't metayr when it's a revius. So then what happened? So he answered him, Vamalei ad revius tar. You're right, only until a revius will it be tahir, but yaisim revius, if it's more than a revius, then it would be a kezayis if it congeals, then tameh, then it will be tameh. Gemara concludes this incident here. Uvash le Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer felt bad, although Rab Simon shmuasa, that Rab Simon did not want to answer him his question. Okay. The Gemara brings, in connection to this very same story, a continuation of what happened similar. Rav Bivi Abba Yosef, Rav Bivi was sitting, and Masna Hadein Uvda, and he was repeating this halacha of this story that happened, that they were metayr, the blood of an avela in the house of Rebbe. So Amalei Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Kahana, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Kahana asked him the same question. The revius tohir, is it only up until the amount of a revius that you're saying that this blood would be tohir? And Yaisim Mikan Tame, more than that, it would be Tame, because then it would be like a Kezayis. Ubat, he kicked him, or it means he pushed him away, he didn't answer him. Amalei Rab Zrike saw that he's not answering him, so he says to him, begin the Shalach at Batbe. He's asking you a question, he wants to know the halacha. So he's asking you a question and you don't have the answer, so you're pushing him away. Amalei, so I told him, no, I'm not pushing him away for that reason. Begin the loy have that daiti be, because my mind wasn't settled. So I pushed him away, I couldn't answer him. And he explained why his mind wasn't settled. The Rab Chanan says the pasuk in the Teichecha, and your life will be hanging in front of you like in a balance. What is this referred to? This is a person that doesn't have a field of his own to plant and to rely on what he's having in his own field, and he has to buy for 1 year at a time, so he doesn't know what's going to be next year. But then it says, in the pasuk, you'll be fearful night and day. This is even a greater klala. This is you buying from a retailer and you're only buying for a small amount of time, not even for a year. Then the pasuk says even more, you won't believe in your life, you will be very worried about your sustenance. This is someone that buys bread from the baker. So you're not sure if there's going to be food in the bakery tomorrow. So he said, Rabbi said, because I'm buying my bread from the baker, so therefore my mind wasn't settled, so therefore I couldn't give him an answer. The Gemara returns to the Shaila, but umahu kedain. What is the halacha regarding this question? A revius of blood from an avela. Is this going to be tameh or not? So hey, Rabbi Yeshua ben Psaira testified the halacha and said, Al dam nevela shehu tahir, that the blood of an avela is tahir. And he's saying it's going to be tahir, it doesn't matter what the amount is, less than a revius, more than a revius. He said that it's going to be tahir. What the Gemara now says, what did he mean to say? Did he mean to say it's always going to be tahir from making something tameh? So the Gemara says no, what he meant is something else. Mahu tohoir, when he said tohoir, he meant to say tohoir milahachsher. It means that it will not be machsher other things to make them susceptible to tumah. The halacha regarding any item, any food item that is, that becomes tameh, it has to come in contact with one of the 7 liquids to make it tameh. And one of those 7 liquids is blood. So what he's saying is the blood that comes in contact with food to make it susceptible to tumah, that's not dam nevela. It has to be dam shchita, other kinds of blood. Dam nevela will not make something susceptible to tumah. That's what he meant to say, toir milahachshe, that it won't make something susceptible to tumah. Aval tama is metame. But if it's more than a revius, and then if it congeals, it becomes a kezayis, it will make something tameh. So the Gemara asks on this, could you say that this is the pshat and what Rabbi Shua ben Psaida said? Taman taninon, but we learned in a Mishnah in Masechta Machshirin, so there it says, Dam hasheretz, the blood of a sheretz, kibisarai, will have the same halacha like the flesh of the sheretz. What's that? What's the unique halacha of this blood? Mitame. This blood will make you tameh, just like the sheretz itself makes you tameh. The blood will also make you tameh. But ve'ena machsha. But this is not included in those liquids. This blood is not like those liquids that will be machsher to make something else susceptible to tumah. And then the Mishnah there says, ve'ein lanu chayetze bay. We don't find other blood that should have a similar halacha. What's usually the halacha with blood? Usually the halacha of blood is, if it's blood from an avela, usually the halacha is the blood itself will make you tameh, and this blood will also cause something else to become susceptible to tumah. So this Mishnah is saying the blood of a sheretz is unique. The blood of a sheretz will make you tameh, but it will not make anything susceptible to tumah if it touches it. It's not part of the Zayin Mashkin. Blood of a sheretz doesn't go into that category. So the question is, it says here in this Mishnah clearly, ve'ein lanu kayetze bay. But now we're saying that when Rabbi Shua ben Psaida said that the dam is tahir by dam nevela, we're saying the exact same thing, that the dam nevela will not make something else susceptible to tumah, but it itself, if it's a shear of a kezayis, will be tameh. So how can we say this pshat and what Rabbi Shua ben Psaida said? So the Gemara says, the answer is v'shir tumase. What's unique about the blood of a sheretz is not regarding the fact that it makes you tameh, but it doesn't make something susceptible to tumah. What's unique about it is the shear of the tumah of this blood. Shadamai mitame kipsare. The shear of the tumah of the blood is like the basar itself. What did we say until here? What's usually the shear of blood to be mitame? It has to be a revius, because a revius, when it congeals, it becomes a kazayas. But by a sheretz, what's unique about it is, how much is the shear of a sheretz to be mitame? Like an adasha, like a lentil. And the chiddush of the blood is that the blood will also be metame like the basar itself, the size of a lentil, which is much less than a kazayas, much smaller than a kazayas, much smaller than a revius. So that was the chiddush about this dam of the sheretz, this last part, that metame kibisare, that has the same shear like the basar. But the other halacha that we said, that it makes tumah, and it is not machsher, that wasn't the special chiddush over here. Right. Rabbi Yaisi says, Pligiba Trein Amiran. This question we're discussing here, a revius of blood from nevela. Does it make tameh or not? So there's 2 Amiran that argued about this. Chada matame, v'chada matoy. One said that it's tameh, and one said that it's tameh. Manda matame, the one that said that it's tameh, ki Rabbi Yehuda. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. And there's a Mishnah in Idias that the Mefarshim here bring that says that Rabbi Yehuda said that the blood of a nevela, if it's a revius, it's metame. And the one that says that it's toy, Rabbi Shua ben Psaida. Going back to what Rabbi Shua ben Psaida said before, so Rabbi Yaisi understood Rabbi Shua ben Psaida literally. What did Rabbi Shua ben Psaida say? Dam nevela shahu tohir. Not like the pshat that we wanted to say now, that it goes on being machsher. It's going on the dam of a nevela, that it's actually not metame at all. So that's the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shua ben Psaida. That's the Gemara's conclusion. That's their machlokes. Amalei Rav Avduma, the min Nechusa, Rav Avduma of Nechusa said, V'yaos, and you're saying correct, that Rabbi Yehuda is the one that said that the dam of an avela does make tameh. The Rabbi Yehuda, Moryaina, the Bein Nesiyahava. Rabbi Yehuda was the Rav. Moryaina means he was like the Meira Hira. He would paskin the halachas in the house of Rabbi. And he's the one that was by the story that we brought before of this mule that died in the house of Rebbe. And over there, what did they paskin? that if it was blood less than a revius, then it's not metame, but if it was more than a revius, it is metame. And who was the one that paskin this? Rabbi Yehuda. He was the Meira Hira, he was the Rav in the house of Rabbi. Going back to what it said in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah it said that the person that would go to withdraw the money of the Shkalim 3 times a year, he would have to be someone that was not poor, was not rich, so people shouldn't say that he became poor because he stole. Or people shouldn't say that he became rich because he took money from the Machtas HaShekel. So the Gemara here is going to add a few different things that they were very careful with this person, that no one should have any suspicion about him. Tani Rabbi Shmuel said, Kavots lo yitrem, someone that has long curly hair and he can hide the money in his hair, he should not go and withdraw the money. There's a suspicion that he could hide the money there. Another pshat, the Rambam actually is guided in this Gemara, kavitz with a beis. Kavitz means a person that's poor and collects money, a kaptzon. A person that collects money should not go and take the money. There's a suspicion that he's taking the money for himself. Tani, it's et na braise, ha-gizbarin, ha-yemefaspesin, bekilkilin. The gizbarin, the caretakers there in the Beis HaMikdash, they would check the pockets of the person that was going in to take the money, that he shouldn't have any money in his pockets. If he's entering with money in his pockets, so it's very easy for him to steal and add money, so it'll look like, oh, it's the money that I had from before. So they would check his pockets that it should be empty before he entered. Tani and Abraisim we learned, medabrin hoye imay. They would speak with this person. They would have him talk to them constantly, mishasho nichnas, from when he entered, achasho yaitze, till he came out, in order that he shouldn't be able to put any money in his mouth and steal that money in his mouth. Fragt the Gemara, why do you have to talk to him? Why can't you just have him fill his mouth with water so he won't be able to put the money in his mouth? Rav Tanchume says you can't do that. When you separate the shkalim for the karbanis, you have to make a bracha. It's a mitzvah. To separate the money from the shkalim. Rav Shmuel bar Nachman b'shem Rav Yonasan said, "B'Teire u'b'Neviim u'b'Chsuvim." We find in Tanakh, Matzanu she'adam tzarich latzis yideya bri'es kederech she'tzarich latzis yideya mokem. That you do things, it should be done in a way that people should see your honesty. It should be transparent for people as much as you have to be pure in the eyes of Hashem. B'Teire minayin. Where do we see this in Teire? The Chsiv, the pasuk says, like it said in the Mishnah, "V'yisem dekiyem Hashem Yisrael." You should come clean in the eyes of Hashem and in the eyes of the Yidden. It's talking over there about a case where the Shvatim, some of the Shvatim were suspected of building a Mizbeach for Avodah Zarah. So it says there that the Eibishter knows it's not for Avodah Zarah, and the Yidden also then in the end knew it's not for Avodah Zarah. So it's important that both the Eibishter and the Yidden should know. The Ksuvim minayin, a pasuk in Ksuvim is where it says in Mishlei, Matzah Chaim v'Seichel Tov, and you find grace and a good seichel be'enei elikim, in the eyes of the Eibishter v'Adam, and the eyes of human being. Gamliel zuge shal Rav Yossi bar Rabun. He asked Rav Yossi bar Rabun about these 3 different psukim. Ezeu ha'mechuvisha b'kulam. Which one of these 3 psukim is the clearest raya to this idea? Malay, he told him it's the pasuk v'yisem nekiyem Hashem Yisrael. Very clearly, it's saying that you should come clean in the eyes of the Eibishter and the eyes of Yidden. Zok the Mishnah. We continue with how exactly they would separate and they'd withdraw the money from the Machtas HaShekel. Shalbeis Rabbi Gamliel. But first, we had this before mentioned, in the house of Rabbi Gamliel, what they would do is, they would enter right before the money was withdrawn from the Machtas HaShekel, from the big boxes, v'shikle beinetz baisav, and they had their shkalim between their fingers, v'zarkai lefnei atayrim, and they threw their Machtas HaShekel right in front of the person that was coming to withdraw the money, and then the one that was withdrawing the money would make sure to push out, to take out those Machtas HaShekel from the house of Rabbi Gamliel into the kuppah, into the box that he was withdrawing. In other words, from the house of Rabbi Gamliel, they wanted to make sure that his Machtas HaShekel is not going to be leftovers. As we'll see soon, there was always leftovers when they withdrew the money. They didn't withdraw everything. So he didn't want that his money should be leftovers, so they went right before to make sure that his Machtas HaShekel is going to come out. The person that's taking the money out, it does not do so until he tells to the Gizbarim there, should I withdraw the money? And they would tell him, yes, shalish pa'amim. They would give him the permission and they would tell him, withdraw the money 3 times. They would tell us him. So they shouldn't think that he's doing it on his own. When he's given the go-ahead, that's when he takes out the money. Now the seder of how this was done is as follows. So there's two pshatim here in this Mishnah. I'll try to explain both pshatim. So one pshat is as follows. Taram esarishayna. So they would first separate the money. So we had already before in the Mishnah, they would separate the money 3 different times of the year. Before Pesach, before Shavuos, and before Sukkot. So it came the first time, before Pesach. It was actually the Shchodesh Nisan, right? So the Shchodesh Nisan, they came to withdraw the money. So you withdrew the money that you needed for the karbanis, and then whatever was left over, v'chipa b'katav. They covered the leftovers of the Shkalim with a cloth, with a towel, or some say with a leather cloth that was covered. Why would they cover it? Because those shirayim, they are not going to be used for karbanis anymore. From those shirayim, you don't withdraw anymore. And then what happens is, after they withdrew in Chodesh Nisan, there were still people that came and continued giving machtas shekel. Those that didn't come in time, they came from further places, they continued giving machtas shekel. But we don't want the new machtas shekel that's going to be given to be mixed with the leftovers that was there in this box, because the leftovers becomes chulin. It's not used anymore for the karbanis. So therefore they put a cloth or a leather covering on top, and then the people that continued coming, giving machtas shekel, they would put their machtas shekel on top of this covering. And the same thing also, Ashniya, when they came to remove the machtas shekel the second time, which was Shavuos time, so they would do the same thing. They would remove the machtas shekel, v'chipa b'katav liyos, and then they would cover the leftover with a leather covering, and the new people would come and give the machtas shekel. So what happens is, when they came and took out the machtas shekel the second time, they took out from what was on top of the covering, not from what was at the bottom, the shirayim. You don't want to take from the shirayim because those are not used anymore. And the same thing the second time, they would cover it, and now people that would still came and added more machtas shekel. Where would they place their machtas shekel? On top of this covering. And then ashlishis, it came the third time, which was 2 weeks before Sukkot. They would come and remove the machtas shekel the third time from what was on top of this covering, from the people that came later. And then, when they removed the machtas shekel, then loy hoya mechape, they would not have to cover it again. V'lama hoya mechape. Why would they cover the machtas shekel after they finished removing and there was leftovers? Why would they cover it? Shema yishkach v'yitroy min adova hatarim, because you don't want to come and take the next time the machtas shekel from those shirayim that are leftovers that are not used anymore for the machtas shekel. This is the pshat of the most rishonim in this Mishnah. The Rambam, however, has another pshat. The Rambam over here says, if you remember, we learned before in the Mishnah, every single time that they separated the machtas shekel, they separated into 3 boxes. 3 boxes, and then again the second time on Shavuos, 3 boxes, and then again on Sukkot, also 3 boxes. So the Rambam says, when they brought the machtas shekel, there were 3 large boxes that the machtas shekel was placed into, and they took from these 3 large boxes into 3 smaller boxes. And the Rambam says what they did was, they took from one box into a smaller box. Okay, that's what it says. Taram esarishayna means they took from one large box, and then v'chipa, they covered that box. B'katav liyos, with this covering. Hashniya, then they took from another large box into a small box. V'chipa b'katav liyos, and they covered that as well. And then ashlishis, and then they took from a third box, and then loyoya machapa, that they didn't cover. And then when it came Shavuos time, they started from that box that was uncovered. And then when it came, then they went to the other 2 boxes. And then the last one they left uncovered. And then when it came Sukkot time, they started with the box that was uncovered. So according to the Rambam, the 3 that it speaks about is the 3 boxes that they would separate every single time that they did this, both Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. That's what the Mishnah here means to say. Okay, let's go weiter in the Mishnah.
Why did they leave it open?
They wanted to always start the next time from a different one. They don't want to always start from the same one that they started. Always, one box should be number 1. Every time another box should be number 1. So each box should get the schus to be number 1. Sagt the Mishnah weiter, Torah Mesarishayna. The first time they took the machtas shekel, which was before Pesach, L'Shem Eretz Yisrael. That was for the people that brought machtas shekel from Eretz Yisrael. They were close enough, and they brought their machtas shekel before Pesach. Vashniya, the second time by Shavuos time, L'Shem Kracham Amukofim Lo. So who brought the machtas shekel at that time? There were the cities around Eretz Yisrael. They brought their machtas shekel later on. Vashlishis, the third time, which was before Sukkot, L'Shem Bavel or L'Shem Madai. Those for the people that came from a far distance, from Bavel and Madai, or L'Shem, Medinas, or Chaykis, they came from very far, so therefore they removed the Machzas HaShekel the third time for those people that came from far away. Talk to Gemara. It said in the Mishnah, Shal Beis Rabbi Gamliel, they would put their Machzas HaShekel right in the beginning, right before he took out the Machzas HaShekel to be sure that their Machzas HaShekel is going to be taken out. So the Gemara asks, why was it necessary to do this? And the Gemara brings an example. Ilu hoyu shnei karayim. If a person has two bundles of, or two baskets of tevuah, v'tara meyachad men al chaveiroi, and you're taking truma from one, and it's going to be truma for this basket and for the other basket. Shemel lepata chaveiroi. Can you not do that? Can't you take truma from one and it'll pata the other one as well? So the Gemara is saying the same thing is over here. The Machzas HaShekel, not all of it ended up being used for the Karbanis. You took out some of it that was needed for the Karbanis, but that patterned everything else. And everyone that was donated, the Machzas HaShekel, was included in what was taken out. So why were they concerned that maybe theirs are going to be left over? So it's going to be left over. But everything that was taken out, they're included in that as well. So the Gemara answers, you're right, Me'ikar Adin, they weren't obligated to do this. But Hanochas Ruach Hi Lehem, this was a special Nachas Ruach for them. The Mefarshim here say that this was like a zrizus, a special zrizus that they had in this mitzvah, Shalayehei Karbim Miskarev Ela Shalahem Tchila, that when the Karbanis Atzibur are being brought, that it should be directly from their Machzas HaShekel. They'll be Yaitz the mitzvah without this, but they wanted it to be Dafki from their Machzas HaShekel. This was a special zrizus that they had in this mitzvah. Tani, we learned in the Braise, Shamat as a katavliyos, if those coverings that we spoke about in the Mishnah, after they separated, the Machzas HaShekel, if those coverings were taken off, so then Nasa Kulon Shirayim. So then everything becomes Shirayim. So according to the Pshat that I said in the Mishnah, the Machzas HaShekel that was added later on top of the coverings, when people that came later, they put Machzas HaShekel on top of the coverings. But if you move the recoverings, so then it gets mixed in with the Shirayim that's inside the basket or inside the box, it all becomes Shirayim, and you can't take from it Machzas HaShekel. Tani, we learned in a Braise, Shlishis, the third time, when they took Machzas HaShekel, which was before Sukkot, He Hoisa Ashira Shebakulam. This was the richest, the biggest coins of Machzas HaShekel. Shahayaba Istriyois Shal Zahuv, there were these golden garments that people brought for the Machzas HaShekel, Vidarkainis Shal Zahuv, and these half coins of Darkainis, which are very large coins that were brought for Machzas HaShekel. Why is this? Because if you remember, we learned before, the people that came from a faraway place, they couldn't carry so many of these small coins. So they would exchange it for larger, more expensive gold coins, and that's what they would bring from a distance. So the third time that they would bring the Machzas HaShekel from these faraway places, so that was the most expensive Machzas HaShekel that was there. Tani, we learned in Abrai said, the first time they took the Machzas HaShekel, it was mostly for the people of Eretz Yisrael that brought it. But L'Shem Kol Yisrael, they were taking it for the Karbanis, that's going to be for all the Yidden. Shnia, the second time before Shavuos, L'Shem Kracham Amakofim, like it said in the Mishnah, it was for the cities around Eretz Yisrael, or L'Shem Kol Yisrael, and they removed the Machzas HaShekel to be used for the Karbanis of all the Yidden. Shlishis, and then the third time before Sukkot, L'Shem Bavel Umada, L'Shem Medinas Erechaikis, for the cities that were further away, or L'Shem Kol Yisrael. They removed it for all the Yidden. Tani, we learned in Abraise, not Talmud Rishaina. So now they removed the Machzas HaShekel. So when they removed the Machzas HaShekel, there were 3 boxes. We had this in the Mishnah before. There was Aleph, Beis, Gimel. There were 3 boxes that they used. So not Talmud Rishaina. So first they started using the money from the first box for the Karbanis Tzibur. And then, but Afa Pi Sheyesh Rishaina, even if there was still leftover money in the first box, Noitul Minayashniya. They already began using from the second box. And Notul Minashniya, they were using from the second box, and Afa Pi Sheyesh B'Shniya, even while there was still money left in the second box, Noitul Minashlishis. They already went to use from the third box. And the reason for this is because if they would use only from the first box until it got totally used up, maybe they won't end up using anything from the second or third box because they won't need it. So therefore, even before they finish the first box, they would go to the second, and before they finish the second, they would go to the third. So they'll use from each box a little bit. Now, Shalma Shlishis, if they came to the third box and the third box did finish, then Chayzel Shniya, they would go back to take from the second box. Shalma Shniya, if the second box was finished, Chayzel L'Rishayna, they would go back to the first box. Shalmo Shlashtan, If the third box was completed, so now they have nothing left. Chayzer v'shekel. So then they have to go and take again machzas hashekel. They have to go and separate more. Some of Farshim actually say chayzer v'shekel means they have to go collect from the Yidden more machzas hashekel. Others say it means, like we said before, regarding the box that they separated from, that there was the shirayim inside. From that shirayim you don't take, according to the Tanakhama, but there was what was on top of the covering. That was the new machzas hashekel. They're going to have to take now from there more. Rav Meir says, and we had this opinion before, Rav Meir has a unique opinion, chayzer l'shirayim. If it all got used up, you could take from the shirayim that was left over in the original box. Shahoyer Rav Meir Oimer, because Rav Meir's opinion is moyalim b'shirayim. That shirayim does still have the kedusha of machzas hashekel. There's meila in this, and therefore. And the reason is because of this exact case. Shema yitztarchu lehen b'saif. Even if it wasn't included originally when you withdrew the money, but it might happen that what you withdrew will get used up, and then you're going to need it in the end. So therefore, it still has the kedusha, and therefore you could come back and take from that shirayim that was left over in the box. Now the Mishnah here, the Gemara here, that is, finishes off this pedic with Agadata. Connected, it looks like it's connected to what we mentioned before about the zrizos of the house of Rabbi Gamliel when they did the Mishnah. So Rab Pinchas ben Yair said, this is a Mishnah, a Braisa that is, that's brought also according to some Girsais in the end of Saita, and over there it's with a different Seder, but there's different mischais to this. So Rab Pinchas ben Yair said, zrizos, when you have zrizos in a mitzvah, alacrity or diligence in a mitzvah, mevil edeinikiyas, it brings a person to cleanliness. Whether it means cleanliness from Avedis, or it means cleanliness literally. Nikiyas mevila de Tara. Nikiyas brings you to being pure. Tara mevila de Kedusha, which is more than just Tara. It's a higher level. Kedusha mevila de Anova, brings you to humility. Anova mevila de Yiris Chet, brings you to Yiris Chet, which is not the regular level of Yiris Chet, because you're talking here already about after Tara and Kedusha, or a higher level of Yiris Chet. Yiris Chet mevila de Chassidus, it brings you to a level of Chassidus. Chassidus mevila de Ruach HaKodesh, and Ruach HaKodesh mevila de Tchias HaMeisim. Tchias HaMeisim mevila lidei Eliyahu Zochel HaTeif. That brings Eliyahu Hanavi. Zrizos, now the Gemara brings the sources for all of this. Zrizos mevila de Nekiyas, the Chsiv, the Pasuk says, V'chila, when you complete your Aveda, you do your full Aveda, B'zrizos, Mechaper. So then it brings you to be Mechaper. Mechaper also is a lashon of to wipe off, to be clean. Nekiyas mevila de Tara, from the Kiyas you come to Tara, the Chsiv, V'chipar alea Koyen. The Koyen is Mechaper, which is the Kiyas, and V'toara, and from that you come to Tara. Tara mevila de Kedusha, the Chsiv, V'tiarai, V'kitshe, from Tara you come to Kedusha. Kedusha mevila de Anove, the Chsiv, Ki Koyam Aram, V'nisa, Sheichen Ad, V'kodesh, Shemai, the Evish is Kodesh, Morim, V'kodesh, Eshkain, V'zdake, Shval Ruach. From the Kedusha you come to Shval Ruach, which is the Anove. Anove mevila de Yiris Chet, from Anove you come to Yiris Chet, the Chsiv, Eikev, Anove, Yiris Hashem, Yiras Chet. Eikev Anove, Yiras Hashem. From Anove you come to Yiras Hashem. And from Yiras Chet, Mevila de Chassidus, Yiras Chet brings to Chassidus, the Chsiv, the Chesed Hashem, Yelam, Adolam, Al Yireyav. So you see from the Chesed, you come, Al Yireyav, that Yiras Chet brings Chesed, Chassidus. Chassidus mevila de Ruach HaKodesh Chsiv, Oz Dibarte B'chol Zayin L'Chasidecha. You speak in a prophecy to your Chassidim. Ruach HaKodesh mevila de Tchias HaMeisim, the Chsiv, and Asati Ruchi B'chem, V'chisem, which is Tchias HaMeisim. And Tchias HaMeisim, mevila de Eliyahu Zochel HaToiv, the Chsiv, by Tchias HaMeisim it says, Hine Anechi Shalech Lachem, Es Eliyahu Hanavi L'fnei B'yem Hashem HaGadol V'Hanoira. This is the Haftarah, the conclusion of the Haftarah of Erev Pesach Shechaliyas B'Shabbos, Shabbos HaGadol. Tana b'shem Rab Meir, another thing that was learned in the name of Rab Meir. Kol yomai, call me that is. Kol mi shekavua b'Eretz Yisrael. Anybody that establishes himself to live in Eretz Yisrael. Umedaber b'Lashon HaKodesh, and he speaks in Lashon HaKodesh. And v'oichol peirosav b'tara, and he eats all of his fruits. He eats his foods b'tara. Even chulin, that you don't have to eat b'tara, but he eats all his fruits b'tara. V'kaire kriyashma b'boiker u'be'erev, and he says kriyashma every morning and every evening. Yeheim v'vusser, it should be known to him, Shuben Olam Abahu, that will be Zeichet Olam Abah. Adran Allah, Perik v'shloisha prakim. Okay, let's go a little bit weiter, the next Perik. Dr. Mishnah, Hatrume Mahayoisim. Okay, so now we know what they did. They withdrew the money of the Machzas HaShekel. We explained how it was done. But now, what exactly was this money used for? It was used for the Karbanas Sibur. So the Gemara, the Mishnah says what it was used for. like Chimbat Tmidim, the Karban Tamid every day, Musafin, all the Karbanis Musaf of Shabbos, Yom Tov, Shchaidish, and also V'nischayim, the Nisachim, Ha'omer, the Karban Omer, Shtei Alechem, and Lechem Apanim, V'chol Karbanis HaTzibur. Everything else that was brought for the Tzibur, which would mean the Ketayres, and all other things that were brought for the Tzibur, came from the Machzas HaShekel. Shoim Reis Fichin, though B'Shviyis, so now Shemitah year, so they didn't have the regular Tfuah that would grow to be used for the machzas for the karbanis oimer and so on, for the shtei alechem. So there was just sfichin. These they grow on their own in the fields. So in Shemitah year, so the shomer they needed special guards that would be there to guard these sfichim, that no animal should trample over it, and they should be protected and used for the oimer and so on. So who would pay them? Neupel and scharon, they would get paid mitrumas halishka, also from the money that they withdrew from the machzas hashekel to stand guard to have this Tfuah ready for the Karban Omer and the Shtei Alechem and the Lechem Apanim and so on. Rabbi Yosi says they don't have to get paid from the Machzas HaShekel. Af ha'roitze, anybody that wants, misnadiv shem echinam, he could donate his services to go and protect this Tfuah as a shem echinam, to do this favor to be used for the Beis HaMikdash. So the Chachamim disagreed with him and they said to him, don't you also agree that this tfuah that's going to be used for the Omer and the Shtei Alechem has to come from the tzibur? If a person is being a Shem Chinam and he's not even getting paid by the hektish, so then it's a private, it's something that he protected and he's bringing privately, so it's not coming from the money of the tzibur. So therefore, he said, the Chachamim say that the Shemrim have to be paid by the money of the Machzas HaShekel, so that the tzvuah that's brought should be from the money of the tzibur. And the Gemara is going to bring different cases where we find where something that's brought in the Beis HaMikdash is brought privately, and it's going to connect it to this machlokes of the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yosi, whether something that's brought from the tzibur could be brought from a private individual. So it starts with the wood that's used on the Mizbeach. So the Gemara, so this is a Mishnah in Tainus. What does it say there? Ma rozman atzi hakayanim va'am lihimonis. So there in the Mishnah it says that there were 9 dates in the summer when they established as a yontif for different families that would bring the wood for the karbanis in the Mizbeach. So the Mishnah there asks, why did they establish these 9 times when these families would bring their wood for the karbanis? So the answer is, Ella, the reason is, B'shah Shal Yisrael Min HaGoyla, when Yidden came up from the Golas in the second time of the second Beis HaMikdash, V'loi Matzu Eitzim B'lishka, there was no wood available there in the room where the wood was kept. V'amdu Elu, these 9 families got up, V'nisnadvu Eitzim, and they donated privately from their wood, they brought the wood to the Beis HaMikdash, Mishalatzman. Masrum letzibur, they gave it over for the tzibur to be used for the karbanis, and the karban man karbanis tzibur, and they brought the karbanis tzibur, and the hisnu iman neviim shebeneim. So at that time, the neviim amongst them made the following condition. They established the following yontif, which is shafilu lishka malaya eitzim. Even in the future, when you're gonna have a lishka that's going to be full of wood, and you won't need these families to donate anything. And v'yomdu elu, and these families are going to come every year. V'nisnadvu eitzim mishel atzmam, and they're going to bring wood on their own. When they donate the wood, the karbanis are going to be brought from their wood that they bring. So here we see that even though the wood that's used for the Mizbeach has to be brought from the tzibur, but these families, when they bring on these 9 dates, we would take from their private wood that they brought. So Amar Rav Acha said about this, that Rabbi Yosi, that Mishnah here, there is following the opinion of Rabbi Yosi in our Mishnah. Why? The Rabbi Yosi, just like we said in our Mishnah, what did Rabbi Yosi say? When it came to the tfuah that's going to be used for the karban omer, a person can privately go and protect it and then bring it as a shem chinam. So just like he said over here, that a person privately could bring from the tzfichin of shmita to be used as an omer. So even though it's a private person, but nevertheless, Rabbi Yosi holds we accept it for the karban tzibur of an omer and so on. The same thing over there, when you get to the wood for the karbanis, we take it from the private families to be used for the karbanis tzibur. And the reason is, even though it's a private person donating it, but when he gives it over, we rely on the fact that he's not giving it over as a private individual, but he's giving it away fully, that it should become the money of the tzibur and it should be used for the karban tzibur. So that Mishnah there is following the opinion of Rabbi Yosi. But Rabbi Yosi, this is a different Rabbi Yosi Bar Zavda, I think the Mefarshim say. And so he said, Rabbi Yosi b'shem Rabbi Ila said, Divrei HaKoil Hi. No, that Mishnah there about the wood that was brought, that's not dependent on the machlokes in our Mishnah. Why? Ma pligin begufei shel carbon. Over here in our Mishnah, they're arguing about the oimer, for example. They're arguing about the carbon itself. Can you take for the carbon itself from a private individual? That's where they argue. Avol b'machshirei carbon. When it comes to the wood is not the carbon itself. The wood is only a machshir for the carbon. That's only something that's being used to burn the carbonis. So over there, kol alma maidi, everybody would agree, shehu mishtana carbon yachad, the carbon sibba, that you can take from a private individual, and we rely on the fact that what he's donating privately is totally giving it over to the tzibur to be used. So over there, everybody will agree.
It's also only the shmira for the
right, but it's not. But it's kanira. It's not only shmira. This like becomes his. It's his own stvua that he's bringing from Shemitah that is going to be used for mamish, the carbon itself. This will become the carbon oimer. So over there we're more machmer, the carbon itself. For the machshir of the carbon, we're not so machmer. There everybody agrees that you can take from a private individual and you rely on the fact that he's giving it over to the tzibur. Another example the Gemara brings for this Inyan Tani, we learned in Abraisa, Isha she'asasak sainis lebna. A woman made for her husband, for her son that is. If her son is the Kohen Gadol. And she sewed for her son, or Kohen Gadol, the aksainis. She'as aksainis levna, the aksainis that you need from the Bignei Kahuna. Ksheira, it's kosher to be used for the Kohen to do his avodah in this. Ubulvach, it's imserena litzibur. She should give it over. If she's giving it to her son to be used, she can't own it privately. She's giving it over for the tzibur to be used. Rabacha, the Rabbi Yosi, Rabacha again said that what it says there is following the opinion of Rabbi Yosi. The Rabbi Yosi, that over here you can take from a person that what he guarded privately to be used for the carbon oimer. There as well, what a woman made privately, she could give over to her son to be worn, to be used when he does the Aved in the Beis HaMikdash. Again, Rabbi Yosi b'shem Rabbi Ila says, no, there's no comparison from our Mishnah to that case. Divrei HaKoil Hi. Over there, it follows everybody's opinion, because ma pligin. When are they arguing with official carbon? When you talk about the carbon itself, they're arguing regarding the carbon itself. If you can rely on using something privately, but avol machshirei carbon. But when you're talking about something which is only a machshir for a carbon, like over there, the ksainis that the beged that the kohen wears. Everybody would agree, shehu mishtana carbon yachad, the carbon sibur, that we can use from this woman to be used in the Beis HaMikdash, and we rely on the fact that she's giving it over completely to the tzibur. The Gemara brings a braise, masnita, there's a braise, pligi al Rabbi Yosi, that argues on Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi that said that the machlokes that it says in our Mishnah does not apply to other cases when you get to the carbon eitzim. The Gemara here brings a Mishnah where it seems like that the machlokes that it says in our Mishnah does apply to the carbon eitzim. There's a few different gersas in this piece of the Gemara here. We're going to go with the gersa that it says, Masnita pliga Rabbi Yosi, that we have over here a braisa that argues on what Rabbi Yosi says, and from this braisa we're going to see that the same machlokes that we have in our Mishnah between Rabbi Yosi and the Rabbanan, whether you could accept privately for a carbon tzibur, does apply to the carbon eitzim. How do you see this? Because it says a machlokes in the Mishnah as follows: Oisan ayomim, those special days of carbon eitzim. So the Tanakama, the Rabbanan say noyegin b'shas carbon. Those were only special days of a Yom Tov for those families in the time of the Beis HaMikdash when carbonis were brought. V'shaloi b'shas carbon. Again, sorry, the Tanakama says holds that this was a special Yom Tov in the time when the carbon is brought, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, v'shaloi b'shas carbon, and even not in the time of the Beis HaMikdash as well. It's always considered to be a special day for those families. Rabbi Yosi says, Einon noegin ela b'shas carbon b'lvad. No, these special days for these 9 families is only in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. So the Mefarshim explain what is the basis of their machlokes. Why should this be special days even after the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash? So the reason is because Rabbi Yosi holds they actually accepted the wood from these families throughout the entire time when the Beis HaMikdash was standing. So only when the Beis HaMikdash is standing are these days Yomim Tovim, because they accepted the wood from them. After the Churban Beis HaMikdash, there's no wood, there's no karbanis, so therefore they're not Yomim Tovim anymore. The Rabbanan, however, hold these 9 families, they never accepted wood from them, even while the Beis HaMikdash was standing. The only reason they're considered to be special days is just as a commemoration. When they came up from Babel and they didn't have any wood, these 9 families donated on these 9 dates. But throughout the time of the Beis HaMikdash, they never again accepted from them because they don't want to take from a person privately. And therefore, they just kept it as a commemoration. So it's a Yom Tov in the time that the Beis HaMikdash is standing, and even where the Beis HaMikdash is not standing. So based on this Braisa, I see that the Machlokes, whether you could accept money privately for the Korban Eitzim between Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanon, the same Machlokes that there is in our Mishnah, you have over here in this Braisa. Now the Gemara brings another Braisa where you see that they argue b'negeya to this Inyan and whether the celebration goes even after the time of the Beis HaMikdash. V'oid min Ada, another Braisa where you see this. The Tanya we learned in the Braisa, Amar Rabbi Elazar bar Rab Tzadik, Anu ayinu mibnei Sanah ben Binyamin. We came from the family of Sanah ben Binyamin. This is after the time of the Beis HaMikdash. And v'chol Tisha B'av liyas b'Shabbos. Tisha B'av fell out on the Shabbos. So the fast of Tisha B'av was pushed off to Sunday, which was Yud of. And on this day we fasted, but we didn't complete our fast. And the reason is because their family's yontiv of their Korban Eitzim was on Yud of. So even when they had to push off the fast to Yud of, and it was after the Churban Beis HaMikdash, they did not complete their fast on Asara B'av.
When did they fast? The Shabbos?
They didn't fast. They didn't fast that year in Tisha B'av because it was their yontiv. Their yontiv of Korban Eitzim.
So that, the